Rain pounded relentlessly on the windshield that night, the wipers flailing against the downpour as I navigated the seemingly endless dark highway. Despite being a seasoned trucker, the tales of the haunted stretch of I-70, where ghostly apparitions supposedly played with the minds of weary drivers, had always seemed like mere campfire stories, until that night. As I approached the section that cut through Old Crow Woods, the storm escalated into a fury. This area was infamous not only for its unsettling history, but for the sudden, dense fogs that could envelop a vehicle in seconds. True to its reputation, as soon as I entered the woods, a thick mist descended, engulfing my truck and reducing my world to the few feet of illuminated road ahead. The pavement was slick, visibility was almost non-existent, and my heart pounded as I reduced speed to a cautious crawl. It was then that I heard it. A faint, almost whimsical sound of a child's laughter drifting through the storm. I shook my head, dismissing it as a trick of the mind, the result of isolation and the late hour. But the laughter echoed again, this time clearer, undeniably real. Peering into the mist, I searched for any sign of life, but found nothing but the endless winding road. Trying to concentrate on driving, I was startled when a figure suddenly materialized in my headlights. A little girl, no more than 10, stood in the middle of the highway. She was soaked through, her pale face staring up with haunting, hollow eyes. My heart leapt to my throat as I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding perilously on the wet asphalt. When the truck came to a stop, I grabbed my flashlight and bolted out. The rain assaulted me as I searched the roadside, but the girl was nowhere to be found. Confusion and fear set in as I swept the light across the road and into the woods. Nothing. She had vanished, as though she had been a figment of my imagination. With a heavy heart and a mind full of dread, I climbed back into the cab. No sooner had I resumed my journey than the laughter returned, this time accompanied by soft, eerie singing that seemed to emanate from the radio, which was distinctly off. A chill swept through me as the childlike voice grew louder, intertwining seamlessly with the storm's howl. All through the night, as I drove, the girl's voice haunted me, never ceasing, until I finally emerged from the woods, and the fog began to lift with the approach of dawn. As the first light crept across the horizon, the singing slowly faded, and the radio crackled back to life with the morning's weather report. Nothing amiss, just another storm that had passed. Since that night, I've driven countless other routes and have avoided that particular stretch of I-70. Sometimes, on particularly dark and lonely nights, I can still hear her laughter mingling with the wind, and I wonder if she's still out there in Old Crow Woods, singing her eerie song, waiting for the next lonely trucker to pass her way. I've been a long-haul trucker for more than 2 decades, crisscrossing the expanse of this country from the frostbitten north to the sweltering south, seeing everything there is to see through the windshield of my rig. But of all the roads I've traveled, none has left a mark quite like the old highway that cuts past Black Pine Forest in the deep south. They say the place is haunted, cursed even, and after what happened to me one foggy, unsettling night, I'm inclined to agree. It was late, somewhere around 2 a.m., and I was running behind schedule. The highway was an eerie stretch of asphalt, deserted and enveloped in a thick, creeping fog that seemed to swallow the beam of my headlights whole. I was navigating a particularly notorious section of the highway, where ancient trees loomed over the road like gnarled guardians of a forbidden realm. Suddenly, in the haze ahead, a figure appeared, a woman dressed in a tattered white gown, standing right at the edge of the road. Her arms hung limply by her side, her face obscured by long, tangled hair that seemed almost alive in the ghostly wind. I slowed down, my heart thumping in my chest, thinking she might be a stranded traveler in need of help. But as I edged closer, a cold dread washed over me. She had no face, just a smooth, blank expanse of skin where her features should have been. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing, my hands shaking on the wheel. But when I looked back, she was gone, vanished into the dense fog as if she'd never been there. Disturbed and needing to calm my nerves, I decided to pull over at the next truck stop. No sooner had I settled into a shaky rest when I heard it, the soft, eerie whisper of a woman coming through my radio. The signal was static-filled, but the voice was unmistakably human, and chillingly familiar. "Come back," she whispered, her voice looping like a broken record. In a panic, I turned the radio off, but the voice didn't stop. It was now emanating from inside my cab, surrounding me, suffocating. I started the engine in a frenzy and hit the road again, pushing my rig to its limits, desperate to escape the haunted stretch of highway. As I drove, the temperature inside the cab plummeted, my breath turning to frost in the air. Glancing in the rearview mirror, my blood turned to ice. There she was, sitting in the back seat, faceless, her white gown a stark contrast to the darkness around her. My mind reeled, and the world spun. I don't remember much after that. I must have blacked out. I woke the next morning to the warmth of the sun on my face, parked safely on the side of the road miles away from that cursed forest. There was no sign of the woman, but the interior of my cab was an inexplicable icy tomb, and on the passenger window, written from the inside, was a single word etched in the frost: return. I've never driven that highway again, and Black Pine Forest, I steer clear entirely. Some roads, I've learned, are better left untraveled, especially those that hold an audience with the ghosts of their past. Late one night, as I guided my truck along the deserted stretches of Route 39, an unnerving fog descended from nowhere, enveloping the landscape in a thick, ghostly blanket. My radio had died an hour earlier, leaving me in an eerie silence broken only by the rumble of the engine and the tires rolling against the cold asphalt. Loneliness on the road was a familiar companion, yet that night, a chilling unease gripped my heart. As I approached Dead Man's Curve, a notorious sharp bend infamous for its high number of accidents, the fog thickened to an almost tangible wall, reducing visibility to a mere whisper of shapes. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter, my eyes straining to pierce the impenetrable white. That's when I spotted it, a faint red light, glowing dimly ahead like a beacon. Assuming it was another vehicle, possibly stranded or in trouble, I decelerated to a cautious crawl. The closer I got, the more the red light seemed to pulsate, not like any vehicle light I'd encountered, but more like a slow, hypnotic pulse, seducing and warning at the same time. A shiver crawled down my spine when I realized the light wasn't on the road but floated eerily above it. I brought the truck to a halt, every instinct screaming at me to flee, but the narrow road hemmed in by thick fog offered no chance for a safe turn. As the red light intensified, it cast an ominous glow that revealed her, the silhouette of a woman bathed in the sinister crimson. She hovered a few inches off the ground, her face obscured by long, flowing hair, arms outstretched as if beckoning me forward. Frozen in terror, I could only watch as she drifted closer, her feet never touching the ground. She stopped just short of my front bumper, and as she raised her head, the red light flickered violently. Her eyes were hollow, endless pits of darkness, her mouth a gaping abyss. With her gaze fixed on me, the temperature inside the cab plummeted, my breath visible as frost in the air. Suddenly the radio crackled to life, emitting a blast of static so loud I clutched at my ears. Amidst the harsh white noise, a voice whispered, just barely audible, "Leave. Now." Driven by raw panic, I threw the truck into reverse, tires screaming against the road as I backed away from the apparition. I didn't stop until the red light and the figure were swallowed up by the fog, leaving nothing but the haunting echo of her voice. Hours later, I pulled into a diner a few miles down, the diner's warm light a stark contrast to the cold dread still clutching at me. The waitress glanced at my pale, shaken face and nodded, a knowing sadness in her eyes. "You saw her, didn't you? The red lady of Route 39? She murmured as she poured me a strong coffee. "They say she's a harbinger, appears on the foggiest nights, always at that curve, always to those with a dark past or a darker future." I left the diner as dawn broke, the haunting image of the red lady seared into my memory. I've avoided Route 39 since, taking longer, safer routes. Some say I overreacted, but the fear I felt was real, as was her spectral warning. And sometimes when the fog rolls in thick and fast outside my window, I can still see that pulsing red light in the distance and hear her whisper chillingly, "Come back."